It was a rowdy evening at the local bar, a weathered establishment nestled on the edge of a small town, where the neon sign flickered intermittently, casting a warm, amber glow across the gravel parking lot. The air inside was thick with the rich, smoky scent of whiskey, mingling with the faint tang of stale beer and the occasional whiff of leather from the jackets of the regulars. The hum of conversation filled the space, a lively cacophony of laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of a jukebox tune that struggled to rise above the din. The crowd buzzed with energy, a mix of locals unwinding after a long day and travelers passing through, their voices overlapping in a symphony of camaraderie and occasional bravado. The wooden walls, adorned with faded photographs and old license plates, seemed to absorb the noise, bearing witness to countless nights like this one. Among the patrons was Jake, a rugged Marine Corps veteran whose presence commanded a subtle respect without him ever needing to raise his voice. He sat near the edge of the bar, nursing a glass of bourbon with a quiet demeanor that masked a steely resolve honed by years of service. His muscular frame, broad shoulders, and sinewy arms were a testament to the physical trials he had endured, each tattoo etched into his skin telling a story of battles fought and won. The ink swirled across his biceps and forearms, dark lines of anchors, eagles, and cryptic dates, each mark a silent badge of honor from his time in the Corps. His hair, streaked with a touch of gray, was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and his weathered face bore the lines of a man who had seen more than his share of hardship. Yet, there was a calmness in his hazel eyes, a quiet confidence that suggested he was never far from readiness, even in the relaxed setting of the bar. Across from him stood a burly biker, a figure who seemed to embody the wild spirit of the open road. His leather vest, adorned with an array of patches, skulls, flames, and the name Iron Reapers, stitched in bold red letters, creaked as he moved, the sound almost a challenge in itself. His arms were thick with muscle, though softened by a layer of fat that spoke of a life more indulgent than disciplined, and his hands were rough, calloused from years of gripping handlebars. One of those hands now gripped the front of Jake's shirt, the fabric bunching under his knuckles as he leaned in close, his breath heavy with the scent of cheap beer and tobacco. The tension between them crackled like static electricity, a palpable shift that rippled through the room as the biker's presence loomed larger than life. The confrontation had begun innocently enough, a casual glance that had somehow spiraled into a stare down. The biker, fueled by bravado and a few too many drinks, had taken offense at Jake's steady gaze, interpreting it as a challenge to his authority in this rough-and-tumble domain. "What you looking at, huh?" he had growled earlier, slamming his glass down on the bar with enough force to make the bartender flinch. Jake had offered a polite nod, intending to defuse the situation, but the biker's pride was already wounded, and he pressed forward, closing the distance between them. Now, with his hand on Jake's shirt, the escalation was undeniable, and the bar seemed to hold its collective breath. The room fell silent, the jukebox's melody fading into the background as all eyes turned toward the unfolding drama. The crowd, a mix of weathered truckers, young locals, and a few curious tourists, watched with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Some whispered to one another, their voices low and urgent, speculating on what might happen next. Others leaned back in their chairs, bracing for a fight, their hands tightening around their drinks as if preparing to duck or intervene. The bartender, a grizzled man with a graying beard, paused mid-pour, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. The air grew heavy, the earlier joviality replaced by a tense stillness that seemed to press against the walls. The biker sneered, his lips curling back to reveal yellowed teeth as his voice boomed across the bar. "You don't belong here, soldier boy," he spat, the words dripping with disdain. The insult hung in the air, a deliberate jab at Jake's military past, meant to provoke and humiliate. The biker's companions, a rough-looking crew seated nearby, chuckled darkly, their eyes glinting with amusement as they egged him on. But Jake remained calm, his expression unchanging as his eyes locked onto his aggressor. There was no flicker of anger, no sign of retreat, just a steady, unyielding gaze that seemed to pierce through the biker's bravado. It was the look of a man who had faced worse than this and come out the other side. The crowd watched, their anticipation building with each passing second. Some of the younger patrons, eager for excitement, leaned forward, their faces alight with the thrill of potential violence. Others, older and wiser, exchanged wary glances, sensing that this could go badly, if not handled with care. The biker, emboldened by the silence and the support of his crew, took it as an invitation to push further. "What's the matter?" he taunted, giving Jake's shirt a sharp tug. "Too scared to fight back?" His free hand hovered near Jake's chest, a threatening gesture that suggested he was about to escalate the physicality of the encounter. Suddenly, the biker made his move, lunging forward with a grab at Jake's chest, his fingers aiming to assert dominance in a crude display of power. But Jake was quicker, years of training kicking in with a precision that belied his relaxed posture. With a swift motion, he deflected the biker's hand, his own arm moving in a fluid arc that caught the aggressor off guard. The crowd gasped as Jake twisted the biker's arm, applying just enough pressure to force it downward, then pinning it firmly to the bar table with a controlled strength that silenced the room. The wooden surface creaked under the force, a bottle wobbling precariously before settling back into place. The yellow arrow in the scene, a vivid splash of color against the muted tones of the bar, seemed to materialize in that decisive moment, symbolizing the turning point of the confrontation. It pointed directly to Jake's hand, highlighting the deft maneuver that had shifted the power dynamic in an instant. The biker's face contorted in surprise, his earlier confidence replaced by a flicker of pain and confusion as he realized he was outmatched. His crew, who had been so vocal moments before, fell silent, their chairs scraping faintly as they shifted uncomfortably. The crowd's gasps turned into a collective murmur, a wave of shock and admiration rippling through the onlookers. Jake held the position for a moment longer, his grip unwavering as he met the biker's eyes with a look that conveyed both warning and restraint. He wasn't here to start a brawl or prove a point unnecessarily. He was a man of discipline, not chaos. The bar seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in as every patron processed the swift resolution. The bartender resumed his pour, though his eyes remained fixed on the scene, while a woman near the back clutched her purse, her breath held in suspense. The tension lingered, but it was clear that Jake had asserted his dominance without crossing into unnecessary violence. The biker grunted, his arm still pinned, and for a brief moment, it seemed he might try to resist. But the strength in Jake's hold, combined with the weight of the crowd's attention, quelled any further defiance. The veteran's tattoos seemed to pulse with the memory of his training, each line a reminder of the battles he had survived, sand-swept deserts, freezing nights, and the chaos of combat. This was nothing by comparison, a mere shadow of the challenges he had faced, yet it carried the same principle: stand your ground, protect your honor, and resolve with precision. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the bar, and adding an eerie underscore to the drama unfolding within. The neon sign flickered again, casting fleeting shadows across the faces of the onlookers, their expressions a mix of awe and relief. The biker's crew exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier bravado fading as they realized their leader had been bested not by brute force, but by a calculated, almost surgical response. The bar, once a stage for the biker's dominance, had become Jake's arena, and the crowd was now his audience. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint clink of a glass as someone set it down too hard, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. Jake's chest rose and fell with steady breaths, his posture relaxed yet vigilant, ready for whatever might come next. The biker, still caught in his grip, seemed to deflate, his earlier swagger replaced by a grudging respect. or perhaps just the realization that he had picked the wrong fight. The yellow arrow lingered in the air, a silent testament to the moment that had shifted the night's course, a marker of the veteran's triumph in the face of unwarranted aggression. As the seconds ticked by, the bar began to stir, the crowd's murmurs growing into a low hum of conversation. The tension eased, though the air remained charged with the aftermath of the encounter. Jake released the biker's arm, stepping back with a measured movement that signaled the end of the altercation. The biker rubbed his wrist, his eyes darting to his crew as if seeking an escape route, but the damage was done. The room had witnessed the Marine Corps veteran's skill, and the legend of that night was already beginning to take shape in the minds of those present.
The jukebox kicked back to life, a slow country ballad filling the space with a melancholic tune that contrasted with the earlier energy. The bartender called out an order, breaking the spell, and the patrons slowly returned to their drinks, their eyes still flickering toward Jake with a newfound curiosity. The biker slunk back to his table, his head lowered, while his crew avoided meeting anyone's gaze. The bar, once a battleground, settled into a cautious peace, the scent of whiskey and leather now tinged with the electric aftertaste of conflict resolved. Jake took a sip of his bourbon, the burn of the liquid grounding him as he leaned back against the bar. The night was far from over, but for now, he had reclaimed his space, his quiet resolve proving stronger than the biker's bluster. The crowd's attention began to drift, though the whispers continued, carrying the story of Seal's revenge to every corner of the room. And in that moment, the rugged veteran remained a solitary figure, his tattoos telling tales of the past, while the present had just added a new chapter to his legacy.
The biker struggled beneath Jake's grip, his face a contorted mask of surprise and pain. The earlier swagger drained from his posture as the reality of his miscalculation sank in. Jake held firm, his hand pressing the biker's arm against the rough wooden surface of the bar table with a controlled strength that spoke volumes of his military training. The crowd, still reeling from the swift turn of events, watched in stunned silence as the tension hung thick in the air, the faint creak of the table under pressure the only sound breaking the stillness. "This ends now," Jake said, his voice steady and low, carrying an authority that cut through the haze of the bar like a blade. With a final, deliberate push, he released the biker's arm, sending him stumbling back a step, his balance thrown off by the sudden freedom. The room erupted in cheers, a wave of sound that crashed over the bar like a tidal wave, shattering the lingering tension. Bottles clinked as patrons raised their drinks high, the amber liquid catching the dim light as they toasted the unexpected hero in their midst. The chant began softly at first, a murmur from a few voices near the back, but it grew quickly, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "Seal's Revenge." The title emblazoned across the scene seemed to pulse with life, the bold yellow letters a beacon of the night's defining moment. The whole bar joined in, their voices a raucous chorus of admiration and relief, the earlier anticipation replaced by a jubilant celebration of Jake's triumph. The biker, now humbled, retreated to a corner table, his head bowed as he rubbed his wrist, the sting of defeat etched into his features. His crew, who had been so eager to back him moments before, avoided his gaze, their earlier bravado evaporating as they slouched in their chairs, nursing their drinks in silence. The shift in power was palpable, the bar's atmosphere transforming from a potential battlefield to a stage where Jake's quiet resolve had stolen the spotlight. The crowd pressed closer, some clapping Jake on the shoulder, others offering nods of respect as they recounted the move that had turned the tide. The bartender, wiping down the counter with a rag, cracked a rare smile, his gruff voice cutting through the noise to call for another round on the house. Jake adjusted his jacket, the leather creaking softly as he smoothed it over his shoulders, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He wasn't one for fanfare, but the warmth of the crowd's approval washed over him, a stark contrast to the isolation he sometimes felt since leaving the Corps. His hazel eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces, some familiar, some new, each one reflecting a mix of awe and gratitude. The jukebox, which had fallen silent during the confrontation, sputtered back to life, a lively country tune filling the space with a twangy beat that invited the patrons to loosen up. A few couples took to the small dance floor, their laughter mingling with the music, while others gathered around the tables, their voices rising as they retold the story with exaggerated flourishes. The scent of whiskey and beer grew stronger. As glasses were refilled, the clink of ice cubes a rhythmic underscore to the celebration. A young man in a flannel shirt approached Jake, his eyes wide with admiration. "Man, I've never seen anything like that," he exclaimed, offering a handshake that Jake accepted with a modest nod. "You're a legend now. Seal's Revenge is gonna be the talk of the town." The nickname born from the moment stuck, and soon others were echoing it, their voices carrying it from one end of the bar to the other. Jake took it in stride, raising his glass in a silent toast before taking a sip, the burn of the bourbon a grounding force amid the chaos. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows and sending a chill through the cracks. But inside, the bar was a cocoon of warmth and energy. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting fleeting shadows across the faces of the patrons, each one illuminated by the glow of the moment. The biker, still nursing his wounded pride, kept his distance, his crew murmuring among themselves as they plotted their next move, or perhaps their quiet exit. The crowd's attention, however, remained fixed on Jake, their cheers punctuated by the occasional shout of encouragement. A woman with a bright smile handed him a shot glass, her voice warm as she said, "To the Marine who showed 'em." The bar erupted again, the sound reverberating off the wooden walls as Jake clinked glasses with her, the camaraderie a balm to his weathered soul. As the night wore on, the story of the encounter spread, carried by the patrons as they moved between tables, their voices weaving a tapestry of details that grew richer with each retelling. Some claimed Jake had moved like lightning, others swore they saw the biker's arm twist at an impossible angle, and a few embellished the scene with dramatic flourishes, turning it into a tale worthy of a Hollywood script. The title, Seal's Revenge, became a rallying cry, a badge of honor for the small town that had witnessed a Marine's quiet strength prevail over unwarranted aggression. The bartender, now busy pouring drinks to keep up with the demand, chuckled to himself, muttering, "Never a dull night here." As he watched the celebration unfold. Jake leaned against the bar, his posture relaxed but alert, his tattoos catching the light as he moved. The ink told stories of his past, missions in deserts where the sand burned his skin, nights under starry skies where silence was a luxury, and the brotherhood forged in the heat of battle. This night, though, added a new chapter, one of civilian triumph that echoed those earlier victories. The crowd's admiration was a reminder of the respect he had earned, not just in the Corps, but here, among the people who now saw him as their defender. A grizzled trucker with a grey beard approached, offering a cigar with a gruff, "Well done, son," and Jake accepted it with a nod, tucking it into his pocket for later. The dance floor grew more crowded, the music shifting to a faster tempo that had boots stomping and hands clapping. Laughter rang out, the earlier tension forgotten as the bar transformed into a celebration of unity. A group of locals began an impromptu sing-along, their voices off-key but full of heart, drawing smiles from even the most stoic patrons. The biker's crew, sensing the shift, gathered their things, their departure marked by the scrape of chairs and the jingle of keys. The crowd barely noticed, their focus locked on Jake, who remained the center of attention without seeking it. The bartender rang a bell behind the counter, a tradition for special nights, and the room cheered again, the sound a thunderous wave that shook the rafters. Glasses were raised high, toasts offered to Seal's revenge and to the Marine who had turned a potential brawl into a moment of triumph. Jake took another sip of his bourbon, the warmth spreading through him as he watched the scene unfold. The bar, once a place of potential conflict, had become a stage for his legacy, the patrons its willing audience. The neon sign outside flickered once more, casting a final glow across the parking lot as the night deepened, the wind carrying the echoes of the celebration into the darkness. A young woman with a camera approached, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can I get a picture?" she asked, holding up her phone. Jake hesitated, then nodded, allowing her to snap a shot of him leaning against the bar, his glass in hand and a faint smile on his face. The flash illuminated his tattoos, the ink a stark contrast against his skin, and the image captured the essence of the night, a rugged veteran basking in the glow of unexpected heroism. She thanked him, promising to share it with the town, and Jake waved her off with a modest gesture, his focus returning to the crowd. The hours slipped by, the bar's energy waning only slightly as the night progressed. Stories continued to circulate, each retelling adding a new layer to the legend of Seal's revenge. Some patrons sketched out plans to commemorate the night, suggesting a plaque or a toast at the next gathering, while others simply savored the memory, their voices growing hoarse from cheering. The bartender, wiping down the last of the glasses, caught Jake's eye and gave a respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement of the night's turning point. Jake returned the gesture, his thoughts drifting to the quiet pride he felt, a feeling that had been rare since leaving the service. As the clock neared midnight, the crowd began to thin, patrons drifting out into the cool night air with promises to meet again. The jukebox fell silent, the dance floor emptied, and the bar settled into a gentle hum of conversation. The biker and his crew had long since departed, their exit unmarked by the revelry that had overtaken the room. Jake finished his bourbon, setting the glass down with a soft clink, and stood, stretching his shoulders as he prepared to leave. The bartender called out a final, "Good night, Marine," and the remaining patrons echoed the sentiment, their voices a soft chorus as he stepped toward the door. Outside comma. The wind had died down, the neon sign casting a steady glow across the gravel lot. Jake paused, breathing in the crisp air, the scent of the bar lingering on his clothes. The night had been unexpected, a reminder of the strength he carried within, not just from his military days, but from the resilience that defined him. The cheers of the bar echoed in his mind, a soundtrack to the new chapter he had unwittingly written. As he walked to his truck, the gravel crunching under his boots, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that Seal's revenge would live on in the stories of the town, a tale of a Marine who had put a biker in his place and united a bar. In cheers, the stars above glittered, silent witnesses to the night's legacy as Jake drove off into the darkness, the weight of his past balanced by the promise of his present.